There were Black Panther parties everywhere. There was one in Cincinnati. And this, the activists were reporting that, you know, it was a woman activist who was saying, look, you know, we used to have discussions late into the night about sexism and about women's role in the movement. And in the morning, you know, men would be just as sexist as they were before. But the one thing that changed them was participating in the breakfast program, because when they were actually serving kids, when they were actually cooking, and when they were actually cleaning up afterwards, that was the time when you noticed transformations in the way that men behave. Now, it's important. I mean, it's interesting. But it's not corroborated by other places. You know, I mean, we ought not to romanticize. Like, if only the men did the washing up, everything would be nice. I mean, it'd be better, but it wouldn't. You know, but actually, in more conversations, I mean, this is one rare example, frankly. But actually, the power that most women speak about when men ultimately listened to them was when women had guns too. But that's important, right? I mean, it's important to think about what it was that it took to get this very chauvinist culture to shift. And all the women activists I've spoken to in the Bay Area, where the things were, you know, it was a very different organizing culture, were saying, look, you know, it wasn't about you know, men doing the washing up. It was about men having guns, and when we had guns, they listened to us. But that's important. That's important to think about. It's important to actually sort of cash that out, because I mean, what happens in Cincinnati, I think, Cincinnati is very important, and I think it does matter if we're thinking about the praxis that gets us to food sovereignty. But it's also important to think about other ways that we get to food sovereignty, other than, you know, the sort of happy clappy everyone does, you know, everyone does the washing up. But of course, I mean, this is not to disparage the fact that, you know, reproductive labour, there are 3 R's when it comes to, you know, the business of unequal work, unequal gender distribution of that work. They're very important. It's recognise, reward, and redistribute. This comes from Diane Nelson, a fantastic socialist economist. But she says, look, there is a very unequal distribution of work. Women are doing far more work than men. So first we must recognise that, and then we must reward it, we must pay it, and then we must redistribute it so that men and women are doing the same thing. And I think that's an interesting way to go. But I also think that we need to think also about the other ways in which women in the Black Panther Party forced men to recognise them. And if that involved guns, then that involved guns. And maybe that's a sort of titillating place to stop, because here's the arc. I mean, we've talked a little bit about you know, the rebellions that are happening around the world. We've also talked about, well, what's the praxis that we need to keep this going? And I think this is the open question for me, whether it's in Egypt or whether it's in Tunisia or whether it's anywhere where there's been some challenge to power. What's the everyday practice? What's the living politic that you use to keep this going?